On the Irish History Boys this week, the Irish News 50 years ago, what was it covering? The Constitutional Convention, the attempts by Unionists and Nationalists to get together and solve Northern Ireland. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. We'll also be discussing why Jody Best paid a woman £500. No, stop that, take that back, it's not that rude. No, it's about breach of marriage promise. Believe it or not, it was illegal up until 1981 to agree to marry someone and then not do it. Poor Jody. The Convention facing the issue. If the period since the Convention Committee began discussing its standing orders has been a depressing one for the electors who voted the Convention into being, there will be signs of satisfaction that at last it can get down to debating the issue for which it is primarily established. It will expect the Convention to grasp the truth of what governing for the 6 counties must be in the future. It must be one in which there is power sharing. There must be real democracy, however and wherever power is expressed. And there must be the outlawing of executive action of a discriminating nature by central and local government bodies. Loyalists may not like the different look which government, if agreed to, must take on here. There will be no more governors of privy councils, no more unionist patronage, an end to discrimination in employment in the public and private sectors, and justice and equality in all forms of discrimination.
Hello and welcome to the Irish History Boys with me, Cormac Moore.
And me, Tim McGarry.
Yeah, so today we're talking about the Constitutional Convention, which was sitting for the first time around now for 50 years, 50 years ago.
Oh yes, this is from June 17th, 1975. The Irish News with a rather optimistic appraisal of the convention. Just for way of background, this is the podcast, by the way, where we explore Irish history inspired by what was reported 100 years ago and 50 years ago on the pages of the Irish News. And the Irish News being rather optimistic about the convention. Just by way of background, 1974, there had been an attempt by the British government to settle the Northern Ireland question and stop the Troubles. And they had had the Sunningdale Agreement, which was
73.
Well, agreed in 17th December.
Yeah.
Started in 1970. In January 1974, there was a power sharing executive, which lasted only very briefly and was brought down by a loyalist strike, the UWC strike, the Ulster Workers' Council strike, in May of 1974. Loyalists objected to a couple of things. I think they objected to power sharing. They objected to the Council of Ireland, which meant that the North and the South parliamentarians would get together, and they thought this was a stalking horse for a Trojan horse for a united Ireland. So they brought the whole proceedings down. The violence continued. The IRA, even during the power sharing exec, continued their violence. So violence was continuing. We're come up to 1974-75. The British government's going, what the hell are we going to do? And they called this convention, where they said get all the...
I think they had written a few white papers beforehand.
Yes, white papers and bits and pieces and green papers, and said, look, we need all the politicians to get together and decide what are you going to do? How are you going to run Northern Ireland? It was only constitutional politicians. Sinn Féin weren't taking part because they didn't stand in elections in those days. There was no Republican representative on it. But this was the convention, where then had an election, and it had a unionist majority. And
there were 78 seats, and the anti-power sharing unionists won 47 of them. Yeah. So a big majority.
So there were pro-power sharing unionists.
Yeah, the Brian Faulkner's kind of, which had essentially become a rump party at that stage.
Yeah.
So they didn't win many seats. Like SDLP won 17, and the Alliance won something like 8, and maybe the Brian Faulkner's party won about similar numbers.
Brian Faulkner was leader of the Ulster Unionists, who brought the Unionists into the power sharing executive of 1974, but it quickly collapsed. He lost half the support of his own party, and
more than half.
The UWC strike basically.
So there was this new body called a United Ulster Unionist Council, which was Ulster UUP, that the anti-power sharing UUP, which was most of them. Harry West led them. The DUP, obviously led by Ian Paisley, and William Craig's Vanguard movement.
Yes.
So that was the 3 parties of the UUUC.
Yeah. Perversely and bizarrely, Bill Craig, who had been the hardest of hardliners, comes out of this and basically agrees to some form of power sharing, doesn't he?
That's so the
convention. The
convention collapses. It doesn't because of the anti-power sharing majority. But two things come out of it. There is division in unionism. That as you said, William Craig from the Vanguard, who had said some awful things, about exterminating people, a couple of years before that, and he during the actual convening, there was about 30 meetings, I think, of this convention, and he actually comes open-minded to some form of power sharing, which is opposed by by most other
Is
unionists.
this a route to Damascus conversion, is it? Or what is
something like
did
that.
they think, like, this is the only way to end violence, what are we going to do? Majority rule isn't going to work it? Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe it is road to Damascus, yeah, it could be. And another thing as well, it shows that the British government, no matter what, because they reject the report is issued in November by the majority saying, no, we want to go back to Stormont rule,
We want
one-party
majority
rule.
rule.
No Council of Ireland, no Irish dimension. And the British government, no,
Well,
ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
So it shows the British government, no matter what's going on, what British government is, whether it's conservative or because it was conservatives who were in power when Sunnydale happens, and then it's the Labour Party
during the UWC strike,
but also during this convention. So it's clear the British governments are not going to go back to Stormont's one-party rule. That's over. So that's in terms of that moves things along a bit in that regard.
Yeah.
In that I know it takes more than 2 decades before we actually have power sharing, but. It's obvious from then that the British government are not going to go back to Stormont one-party rule. So
we did a show, when the Walk Gang did a show called Pop Goes Northern Ireland, an excellent show. I'd thoroughly recommend it to you. I think you can see some of it online now. It was an archive show of the Troubles from '68 up until, and it was basically pure archive, and then the music at the time. But Bill Craig is quite a big character in the early 70s, and he is feted and loved and adored by the people. There's a lovely clip of him with women in the Shango.
And David Trimble was a vanguard.
He wasn't dead. Bill Craig, he's our man.
Yeah.
Then there's a clip we have of him after the convention report where Bill comes out and says that power sharing might be a good idea. And he's in a meeting in a small orange hall, and he's basically saying nobody knows, everybody has suffered during the Troubles. This is the only way forward. And he's in a small orange hall, and there's about 100 people with their arms folded, looking very glum, going, this isn't Bill Craig. What happened to Bill Craig? And he clearly was not getting a good reception, shall we say.
Well,
so even at 75...
He went off, and he went off the radar afterwards.
Yeah, no, completely, yeah. He went off, and he's a lawyer, I think.
And he died late in life, but he was a peripheral figure.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and he was a massive figure in the start of the Troubles.
Yeah. But during the UWC strike, he was massive as well.
So this was an attempt by the government, the British government, to say, right, come on, all get together and sort something out. But because it's based on an election, and the anti-power sharing lobby was far stronger. Because there's a paragraph in this which is worth reading, because this is the Irish News being slightly optimistic. The convention members have had the benefit of discussion papers from the Northern Ireland office in the hope that from such information a debate can emerge in which the members really face up to the issue of finding an agreed formula for a system of devolved government which will offer the seeds of hope and provide the lines for a new form of political development acceptable to all those with the will to make it workable. Have you ever seen a weaker sentence of weak hopes? There's a discussion paper which might get people to sit down and discuss a possible formula of a new form, the daddy, and you just go...
Written by the Northern Ireland office.
Written by the Northern Ireland office, and you just go, that's going nowhere, lad. That is a forlorn hope if ever there was.
I don't know, just maybe they didn't have an editorial to write that day. So
I think they were trying to be optimistic. They were saying there's hope here.
It's a half-hearted optimism at best.
Yeah.
I don't think the Irish News editorial team really thought that it's going to work.
Don't criticise the Irish News editorials. So the convention kind of collapses then in a puff of its own logic, because the anti-power sharing unionist says, we're not having power sharing, can we have Stormont back pre-7? Now, I presume they're going, again, the violence was horrible in 74, 75 again.
There was a ceasefire, an Irish ceasefire. But
it was an Irish ceasefire.
More name than practice.
Exactly, and there were hot sectarian murders happening at the time. It was really quite grim.
And I think the Shankill butchers, they were probably starting around then as well.
Starting around that time. So it was a period when kind of, political compromise was not going to win you many votes, was it?
No, it certainly wasn't. Look, it was a foregone. Once the election results came in, it was a foregone conclusion that this wasn't going to work. So that was the reality. But again, it's like the unions they were facing their own kind of existential crisis. Like they had their own party show for 50 years. And then when that goes in 72, like it's heart wrenching for them. It's very difficult to adapt to that.
Yeah.
And this is only a few years after. This is like 3 years after losing Stormont.
Yeah. So
they're of course going to be reticent to that. Like it's not as if now they asked for today. We want one party majority rule. Of course to be laughed at. Yeah. But this is only 3 years after they had 50 years of one party rule. So it may sound a bit far fetched now, or a bit, that's very insensitive of them. But if just 3 years after having it, and having it slip from them, it's not that surprising, is it, that they would have asked for it again?
I may be wrong, but somebody may correct me on this. But I remember some people talk of saying that Ian Paisley was nearly persuaded about power sharing, and then saw an opportunity to put Bill Craig out to hang out to dry, and basically changed his mind at the last minute and went, "Oh no, I want majority rule." I could be wrong. Somebody may correct me on that, but I think there's an argument that the DUP were kind of wobbling a bit, and then said, "No, we're going for majority."
Can you
rule.
imagine if he had?
Well,
because Harry West wasn't a very strong figure, was he, politically?
No.
So if Paisley and Craig had
said,
accepted some form of power sharing, that surely would have had a lot of weight, wouldn't it?
Well, you think when he eventually went into government with Sinn Féin in 2007, was it? There were still people not very happy about it.
Well, he got sidelined, but still, he obviously was coming towards the end of his career in 2007. But it still was a shock that the way he was abandoned by a lot of his former allies, But I still think if Craig and him at that time, that juncture, Craig and Paisley had come out and I think that could have been decisive.
I mean, if there was some form of power sharing, could have worked.
It could have made a difference. It's hard to I'm not a big believer in what ifs. But that is interesting though, that Paisley.
But then we get to 98, where they eventually agreed to power sharing in a very weak Council of Ireland, and with Seamus Mallon famously described as Sunningdale for slow learners. So they could have had power sharing in 1975.
They couldn't. I know what you're saying about Ian Paisley, and maybe that is true, but I still feel it was just such a leap for unionists to jump through, considering where they come from. They had full control 50 years, and then all of a sudden they're sharing who they would argue were SDLP, whether SDLP or Sinn Féin. They were all Catholics who were seditionists, who did not want the state to exist. They did not want Northern Ireland to work. We hear that a lot now. About Sinn Féin and government. That does Sinn Féin does it benefit Sinn Féin for Northern Ireland working, or does it benefit Sinn Féin by Northern Ireland being in its status in? Which is better? And they were saying with the SDP, if we give these people positions in government, they don't want this place to exist. These are nationalists or seditionists. So,
and then on top of that, you have the IRA, who have a ceasefire in name only, but they are liaising with the British government and being recognised by the British government. There's presumably there's a lot of fear that backstage there's talks going. How long are you? But
it was also the Protestant churches met with the IRA, and they brokered in many ways that ceasefire in late '74, and the Protestant churches got a lot of backlash from a lot of unionist politicians for talking to the IRA and getting that deal.
Exciting news, Irish History Boys fans. We are taking to the stage and bringing the Irish History Boys experience out of this very dull and boring studio and into the real world. Yes, if you want to hear details first, sign up to our newsletter, visit any of our socials, click the link, sign up, and you'll get details of the event once it is announced. It's top secret, but it will be very, very good, I promise you. Well, from the sublime to the ridiculous, slightly ridiculous. I love this story. This is 1925, where a woman with £200 damages against a Monaghan man for breach of promise of marriage. And this is a great story. Dublin High Court did yesterday, June 18th, 1925, Mr. Justice Sullivan and a jury, an action was tried in which Rebecca Brown of Drumclan, Brandrum, County Monaghan, spinster, there's a word you don't hear often enough these days, spinster sought to recover damages for an alleged breach of promise of marriage from John Miller of Turmadown, Brandrum, farmer. Oh, that's a great story.
Farmer,
A farmer who basically, allegedly, according to the plaintiff, promised to marry him, and then
he rescinded.
Mothers-in-law got involved. Is that what happened?
There was another one. There was another part of that story as well. So that was 1917. So this is obviously in 1925. And then he married another lady.
He married another lady. Then.
So yeah,
the
so
cad.
He was, but there was an interesting part that it was in 1924. So I'm going around to the dances. But basically, I think where's the story here? He'd known so apparently the girl he married, I think, is Miss Alexander. He'd known Miss Alexander since her school days. Early 1918, he got a letter from the plaintiff, Miss Brown, about Miss Alexander running about at night, going to dances and sprees. He handed that letter to his mother, who gave it to Miss Alexander's mother. He didn't know what became of that letter, but heard that it went into Mr. Martin's office through the solicitor. He had no communication with the plaintiff about that letter and stopped keeping company with her after it. So he never gave her a pendant to his knowledge. But the jury found in favour of
Ms. Brown.
Miss Brown.
Yeah.
And they had to pay £200.
Rebecca Brown. You had to pay £200. £200 for breach of promise to marry, and that was law. That if you promised to marry somebody and you broke off the engagement, you could be sued for damages.
Yeah, so it's a breach of contract. So it was basically an engagement was seen as a contract back then, and only in that was only rescinded in 1981 in Ireland under the Families Law Act. Yes, if you broke off engagement, now you can still to this day, if you break off engagement, say there's a property involved or there's a kind of some legal implications, and an engagement is broke off, yet there still can be some opportunity to get money back. Say, for example, you're organising a wedding, and you pay for the venue or whatever, the honeymoon or whatever, and then the engagement is broken off. You could actually bring that to court, say, I should get half that money back, or from the other person, but you can't bring it to court for actually breaking off with the engagement.
Okay, but you could get costs if you're out money for the
if it's involved with engagement, which seems reasonable, So but the whole idea, but that was and obviously it's because societal norms have changed completely since the 1920s, But famously, George Best was.
You said this. I have never heard this before.
George
But you're telling me George Best was sued for breach of promise to marry somebody. Have you read George Best's autobiography? He wasn't a marrying type. He wasn't great. Well, he had a couple of goes at it.
Where did it all go wrong, George?
He was a man who didn't keep himself to himself, shall we say.
No, definitely not. But yeah, a lady called Eva Hansdell or something like that. Right. She took him to court for breach of promise of marriage, and it didn't go to court. He paid her £500.
He paid her
£500.
No,
so
right.
it only changed. The law only changed in England and Wales in 1970.
Right.
About breach of promise of marriage. So if it had gone to court, he might have lost that. Obviously. Well, I don't know what it means about a footballer paying something before it goes to court, what that says, but he paid £500 anyway in 1969 for this problem to go away.
Absolutely no inference of liability. I think that most people would say. Just he was being very generous, and he was a very generous man and a very caring man.
He was known for being a very generous man. He was, but
very generous with his affections, shall we say?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But. It was there for years, for centuries, in fact, and it was people. Now the only thing if you were a man, I don't think you could take a woman to court. That was
what?
There was no cases of actually men successfully taking a woman to court for breach of promise in marriage. It was always the other way around.
Really?
Yeah.
That's very sexist.
In my research for this, I actually saw that. Yeah.
So women couldn't. Presumably, very few women asked men to marry them in those days.
But an engagement is a game, so it's an agreement between two people. It's not about who asked. But if the woman broke it off, the man had no recourse to get compensation for that.
All right,
which is interesting.
That's very sexist.
Yeah.
You'll be delighted to hear this.
Will
You'll be delighted to hear this. We have a question from a member of the public who has watching or listening to our programme. And by the way, you can get in touch at any time on WhatsApp or email. If you have any questions, send us a WhatsApp message or voice note to 07483 313 842 or drop us an email at irishhistoryboys@gmail.com. Now, I'm going to embarrass myself again because I keep mispronouncing this person's name, and you're going to tell me the correct pronunciation of this. Fionnan. Why can I not get that right? I don't know.
And you're a Catholic atheist.
I'm a Catholic. I only learned Irish for 1 year at school. My sincere apologies. Fionnan Murphy. Fionnan's a male?
Yes.
Sorry. Mr. Murphy.
This is getting more to Tim,
Mr. Murphy, thank you very much.
Can we cut this piece for Tim's sake?
I've now ruined it now because Mr. Murphy says he is a big fan of the podcast. He's a big fan.
He was a big fan of the podcast.
Up until some idiot couldn't even pronounce your name. I do apologise. Big fan of the podcast. He says... is there any prospect of either jurisdiction on Ireland, north or south, commemorating the centenary of the Boundary Commission report on the 3rd of December 2025, which would be 100 years ago? Do you think there's any prospect of people going, hey, the Boundary Commission report should have come out today?
Yeah.
Because it didn't actually come out, so it's
it didn't come out yet. It was only released by the National Archives in 1968. But I don't know if either government will be, like there's lessons we can learn from all incidents in history. So you could, you could swing it whichever way you want, depending on which government you are. Obviously, the Northern government, if you're a unionist, the Northern government obviously is a coalition of sorts.
Should they not be celebrating the centenary of the final boundaries of Northern Ireland? I suppose they tried to celebrate the centenary of 21. It didn't kind of didn't go well for them, did they?
Sinn Féin tried to do that, did they?
No, the Unionists tried to celebrate the centenary of Northern Ireland. It was kind of half-hearted.
But I think with COVID as well, I think
that didn't help. Yeah,
I think the British and Irish governments were kind of collectively sharing a sigh of relief that there was COVID during the centenary of partition. It could have been a messy one, but I think Unionists, it could be celebrated, as in this was when the issue was almost permanently settled at that stage. For a good while anyway. It definitely brought closure to the whole decade.
Yes, it's the end of the.
It's decade of the the debate around the partition, around the border. There's a lot of uncertainty before then in both jurisdictions. Yeah. Even in British politics, it was a real headache for them, and they wanted to get rid of it. Right. So this brought finality to it, one way or the other. So I think unions could definitely see that as it was a big occasion. They didn't lose any territory.
To be fair, they are fond of a commemoration now. Your unionists, like a wee march.
It's our nationals.
Ulster Day in September was the signing of the Covenant. 12.
Battle of the Boyne, of course.
You could have another one in December. 3rd of December 25. Was that the date when it was or was that the date where the Irish government did the deal with the British?
The tripartite agreement.
Right.
Was 3rd of December.
So just to be clear, whether the Boundary Commission, which we have discussed a few times, but some people may not know it and know the details, in which case they should buy a copy of The Root of All Evil, the Boundary Commission by Dr. Cormac and Tim. Thoroughly entertaining.
Thanks for plugging this.
Thoroughly entertaining book. I'm getting 25% of the profits.
So that's it. And the losses, do you have to cover 25% of them?
You raise your eyebrows. Profits. This is better than 50 Shades of Grey. This is 50 Shades of red, white, and blue, and green, white, and orange. This is. But
you got it back there. Yeah.
So the Boundary Commission basically finalised the final boundary between North and South, which was the 6-county boundary, which where it originally started. There's a lot of detail there, but basically the Boundary Commission was supposed to. Nationalists thought, the huge chunks in the north are going to go south and vice versa. In fact, the Boundary Commission. A report didn't even come out officially. It was leaked to the press, and what the leak
and that wasn't the report. It was a good reflection of what the report was going to be. Yeah, very accurate.
Which basically meant there was going to be tiny tinkering around the edges of some place. So there were a few Protestant communities in Donegal were going to go to the north, which horrified the Free State.
That's what Cosgrave was most fearful was actually Free State territory and people going to the north and actually him gaining territory from the north. So.
And nationalists thought, we're going to get Fermanagh and Tyrone and Derry and Newry and all sorts of things. And in fact, they were getting tiny little nibbles.
They would have got across McGlen and South Armagh. And they would have got like parts of Fermanagh, bits of Tyrone, but tiny compared to what they were for. So it was shelved.
The final report of the Boundary Commission was leaked. Horror, particularly in the south, going, what? We might have to hand back some people to the north, and also it's going to stay the same. We're not getting counties Fermanagh and Tyrone or anything like that.
Yeah.
And then they went to the British government and went, how can we sort this out? I know. Have you got any money? Give us some dough, will you? Give us some dosh. Yeah, is that a fair reflection?
Well, they did ask for like Kevin O'Higgins was very involved in those negotiations. He did ask for. That the rights of Catholics will be enshrined, in Northern Ireland through the return of PR voting, through there was even a suggestion of having an ombudsman for Catholics.
Right.
People saying Joe Devlin would be good for that. So to safeguard their rights, that the specials will be disbanded. These things were asked for, but Craig said not happening. Do you know what? It's even a better suggestion. Why don't the British government waive your public debt responsibilities?
Right.
Which was the monies like on the face of it were scary, like £150 million, like was at the time as well. So that's worth billions now. the Free State was liable for potentially, depending on which way, because there was meant to be a kind of a body that was actually going to decide on what exactly the Irish Free State owed in terms of public debt from the UK. But they're talking about numbers around 150 million paid off over 60, 80 years. So, like, eye-watering amounts of money for a country that had just had a civil war. But then again, like the Northern government was saying, like, you never get a penny off the Irish Free State government. Like, you can't ask a government to pay you loads of money if you're about to go bankrupt. So so it was but anyway, it was agreed. The Irish government agreed to the public debt being waived, and nothing would change with the border. There'd be no kind of safeguards for Catholics in the north, and the Council of Ireland was also disbanded. This is the body that was meant to meet to discuss things like fisheries and railways and disease of animals, and that was disbanded as well.
So it was a win-win-win for unionists, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, the unionists.
Craig said not an inch, and he didn't have to give an inch.
He never got an inch, and I think he would have been okay with the award,
right?
If they had lost a bit of South Armagh and a bit of Fermanagh and but gained parts of East Donegal.
He didn't want South Armagh.
Believe it or not, want South Armagh. But he actually said he was happy enough. Whichever way it turned out.
Right.
Got rid of the Council of Ireland as well. So look, it was a big win for Craig. Yeah. Absolutely. So I'd answer the question by Fionn. I don't know if it will be commemorated or definitely not celebrated, maybe, but I think lessons can be learned. Like the Taoiseach is launching my book on the root of all evil in Dublin.
Oh, did you hear that name drop
next month? Yeah. So so that shows he's recognised the Boundary Commission and its importance. So
but it is one of those events that most people, you stop them in the street and ask them about the Boundary Commission, they'll go, never heard of it, don't know anything about it.
Do you think so? In the south, definitely, yeah. But in the north,
no, in the north, yeah. No, I didn't even. Most people think history kind of stops at the treaty. Well, around
that time, that settles it.
That's kind of all sorted out then. They don't really know the details of it.
Look, it's very complicated.
It's a complicated story.
I'm doing a bad job of selling my book. It's a page turner. I swear to God, it's a page turner.
It genuinely is.
But it is very complicated, and it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. It says so much about the partition of Ireland, the relations between North and South, between Ireland and Britain, between even Britain and Northern Ireland, but internally within Britain, internally within nationalism, internally within unionism. It says so much what's happening at that time.
And it also tells us why we're here today and why we're in the situation we're in today. But whether it be commemorated or not, do you remember 1920 or 2021, the president got into quite a bit of hot water for refusing to go to Armagh, was it, for which was a cross-community ecumenical service.
And the Queen was meant to go there as well, wasn't she? And she was sick, though.
Yeah, I think she was sick and sent somebody. I don't know who she sent. But the president, Michael D. Higgins, got into a lot of hot water because he claimed he wasn't invited properly or something. He got an invitation, wasn't right. But it seemed like a bit of a diplomatic flu that he didn't want to be in a church kind of celebrating 100 years of partition in Northern Ireland.
I think the wording was, it seemed more of a celebration than a
commemoration,
and obviously, like, why would a nationalist celebrate partition? I think there was issues with the wording of it, and you could definitely see where the precedent was coming from.
Yeah.
Because to be fair to Michael D. Higgins, he's very sensitive on issues around the decade of centenary. I think he's been a really good president.
Yeah, he knows his history too.
Knows his history and has been a real great promoter of historians and history. And also reconciliation as well, and seeing all sides of things and open new perspectives of history. So, I think he was calculated in this decision. I think he knew what he was doing, and he saw it as a celebration of partition, which well,
it's interesting.
I don't think he would support.
My brother was in Dublin at the time of the 2016 the celebration of the Easter, the commemoration of the Easter Rising, which he was kind of it was brilliant. It was brilliantly done.
Look, I'm an historian, so
there was lots of debate around the whole issue, and there was no way triumphalist. There was no way triumphalist. But it was it was also a big celebration, great parties in Dublin as well. But there was a lot of historical debate on TV and live and stuff like that.
Amazing. I was starting off as a historian. I was more into sports history then. That was more of the area I was writing in and researching. So I was wondering, what's it going to be like? How is it going to be received? How are the public going to react to it? I just couldn't get over the amount of interest, the huge crowds. Every event had massive crowd. It was just this real opening up of history in the city, and you could see there was just a massive massive interest amongst the public. And my job as Dublin City, historian in residence, those 6 jobs, or 6 of us became historians in residence the year after to keep the momentum going because of such an interest amongst the public history.
Yeah.
And it was started by that kind of 100th anniversary of the Easter Rising.
Right.
And it was Dublin was really colourful. Great debates, great angles, new angles, about the Easter Rising, that hadn't been explored before. The experience of children, the experience of women, even the experience of the people on the other side, the British soldiers. They were all studied, in depth that hadn't been before. So I thought it was really well done, the whole commemoration.
Best story about that, Jim Allister was on a certain panel, and a political debate panel.
In Dublin?
No, in Northern Ireland, and was asked, should he go down? Should he celebrate in 1916? Would he go down to Dublin to celebrate 1916? And he said, why would I celebrate something that happened in a foreign country? And another panelist said, will you celebrate the Battle of the Boyne every in a foreign country? So why not 1916? But obviously commemorations here are tinged with a lot of politics. So
they are in South too. Obviously, Civil
War.
But
this is kind of neutral. You're not going to get too excited about this, are you? I don't mean politically. You're not going to get too excited. Yeah. I mean, nationalists. When the report was leaked, nationalists go, "Feck me, we're screwed here." I mean, we're
on our own.
We're on our own.
Yeah.
Was there a outpouring of grief and disappointment, or was it kind of just kind of knew this was coming, or did they?
Oh no, it's a big disappointment. They and I do blame Northern Nationalists for this as well. That they put too much store in the Boundary Commission. They were expecting too much from it, and they were expecting too much from the Free State government, that it wasn't in the gift for Free State government to give. They were expecting that, and then they blamed it all on the Free State government when the Free State government were in a bind anyway, because the treaty wording of the boundary clause in the Boundary Commission clause, the treaty basically set it up for the fall it got. It was so ambiguous. It was going to be 2-1 on the commission. It's always going to be difficult to realise any of the dreams of nationalists. But they were absolutely devastated, and it still sticks with them. Northern nationalists still feel abandoned, and that was kind of where the kind of irrevocable blow between nationalists in the north and the south happened. They were abandoned for money. And that's still there. That's still there. So it's still felt very rawly. Definitely, I think my book and the whole issue of the Boundary Commission are definitely of more interest of Northern nationalists, and particularly ones close to the border areas.
Right.
And it still sticks to this day. And it still resonates that people do think like the Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are partitionist parties, despite rhetoric. There's always debate about, should Irish citizens in the North vote in Irish presidential elections. You ever look at the Met Éireann forecast?
Oh, yes, it's a big issue.
6 counties lobbed off it, and given and then watch RT if you want to watch the GA games, or even a Late Show. You can.
That's right. You can't apply for.
You can't apply
for the competitions and stuff.
There was one competition, the All Ireland final, and who was it? It was Armagh was in
That's
it.
right.
Armagh people couldn't apply for it because they're not in the jurisdiction. So. There is still these things that really do still resonate, and it's still there, and the Boundary Commission was very keen that kind of that breaking of that relationship between North and South was the Boundary Commission was the biggest factor in that.
And then 100 years on, because of the boundary is so set that you have 2 separate jurisdictions where they're developed completely differently, 2 separate polities, 2 separate we have different.
But even I have a chapter in the book about it was after the Boundary Commission had done all their homework, basically met all the people, read all the documents, done all the maps, done all the data. So they were getting their report ready, and so the Irish Free State government and the British government met to decide. So what happens when we do have? Because they're assuming obviously the war is going to go through.
Yeah.
What happens when there's a change of territory? What happens? So then Cosgrave goes back to Dublin and gets each minister from each department to say, okay, do up list what has to change. And this is only 4 years after partition, but there are huge changes in finance, in the customs posts. There's huge changes in pensions, divergence in pensions, divergence in unemployment insurance, divergence in schools. There's divergence in everywhere. This is only 4 years after partition, and there was huge changes. Just changing of the border a small bit was going to make a massive difference in terms of how departments are run, how people were paid or not paid, or how they were treated or not treated. And that was only 4 years after partition. So So the talk, if we want to talk about, say, New Ireland or what's the new Ireland going to look like? Like the changes will be seismic.
On both sides.
On both sides, yeah.
I think
That's something we shouldn't be afraid of, but we need to actually acknowledge this is
Yeah.
what's at stake here, and this is what can happen. In this scenario.
I think a lot of nationalists were particularly upset because the Southerners were so angry that some people in the South, in Donegal, as you say, was a Kavanagh Monaghan, would have come back into the North. And Cosgrave said, we can't hand back our people to the North. And nationalists going, whoa, when did we stop being our people or your people or whatever?
No, and he said, even when they got the agreement, we've safeguarded our people as well. He said, and also there was a delegation from the North that came down when those Dáil debates were happening to pass the tripartite agreement. There was a delegation from the North. They weren't allowed into the gallery because they're go to your own jurisdiction, basically the Northern Parliament.
Right.
And they were abandoned pretty quickly. And then this notion of we'll cooperate with the Northern government. We'll meet regularly. That's the way to end partition. And then they never meet at all.
Yeah.
Again.
Well, whose fault was that? Was that their fault?
Both parties' fault.
Yeah,
There was meeting today with the Department of Agriculture. The two ministers of Agriculture met in January 26 in Dublin. But those meetings were sporadic. The two premiers never met once afterwards. And even like one of the guys who ran the North Eastern Boundary Bureau, this is the body set up by the Free State government to compile the Free State's case, nationalist case, before the Boundary Commission. That was winding down in once the Boundary Commission report collapsed. And Stevens, E.M. Stevens, he said we should have, like, he's looking for a job for him to continue on as. Should we have a person coordinating our activities with different Northern departments, so we have a kind of a one policy for the North? And he was told, no, we're not interested. We'll do our own thing. And most departments did nothing.
So to answer Mr. Murphy's question, unlikely that there'll be anything formal.
I don't see anything formal. I don't see anything.
I reckon you and I should book the SSE Arena and do a talk on it. Yeah, we could.
I'll leave that to you.
Yeah.
Like that breach of promise thing, you pay for it, and if it goes belly up, you're on your own.
We'll give out free books. Cormac, you're laughing, but you're not really laughing. Deep down, you go, what? And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Irish History Boys. We'll see you next week. In the meantime, feel free to drop us an email at irishhistoryboys@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.
All the best.